The Japanese sword, known globally as a symbol of the samurai culture, has a storied presence in Japan's history. Many of these swords are celebrated for their exceptional sharpness and the legendary tales of the warlords who wielded them. In this video, I will introduce the top 5 most famous katana that still exist today. Number 5. Shoku Ki Mitsutara. Shoku Ki Mitsutara is said to be a sword crafted in the 13th century by Mitsutara, the founder of the Osafune school, which is the largest swordsmith school in Japanese history. This sword is known to have been bestowed by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a warlord who unified Japan in the 16th century, to Date Masamune. Masamune, known by the nickname One-Eyed Dragon, was a one-eyed samurai warlord. He succeeded his family's leadership at 17, and by 19 had control over most of northern Japan, becoming a powerful daimyo at a young age. It is said that had he been born 10 years earlier, he might have become a ruler of all Japan. There's an interesting anecdote behind the unique name Shoku Ki. It is said that the name was derived from an incident where Masamune, who favored this sword, accidentally cut through a bronze candle stand when he lightly touched it with the blade while cutting down a vassal who had made a blunder. Thus, the sword came to be known as Shoku Ki, meaning candle stand cutter. Afterwards, this sword was presented to him by the Tokugawa shogunate family, who had achieved unification of Japan. It was then passed down through generations as a family heirloom. However, this sword, which could be described as a treasure of Japan, was struck by tragedy. In 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake occurred, causing extensive damage and affecting approximately 1.9 million people. The Tokugawa family's residence in Tokyo was also damaged in this disaster. During the earthquake, a storehouse containing 168 famous swords exploded due to the impact, and many swords were burned. At that time, the blade collar of this sword melted due to the heat and fused to the blade. As a result, although its value as a historical artifact remained unchanged, it was believed that its value as a work of art significantly decreased in the eyes of the people at the time, and the sword disappeared from the public eye. Among Japanese sword enthusiasts, it became commonly believed that this sword had been destroyed in the earthquake. However, in modern times, the popularity of a video game called Touken Ranbu, which features swords as motifs, triggered a surge of inquiries about this sword from female fans of the game to the Tokugawa family. Following an investigation by the Museum of the Tokugawa family, it was discovered that the sword still exists, albeit in a burnt condition. Since then, the museum regularly displays this sword, attracting many visitors who come to see it. Number 4. Koryu Kagemitsu. Koryu Kagemitsu is a work of the renowned 14th century swordsmith Kagemitsu, considered one of his finest creations and currently designated as a national treasure. Originally, this sword was said to be the favorite of the military commander Kusunoki Masahige, who played a crucial role as the right-hand man to the emperor in the 14th century. However, its whereabouts became unknown over time. Then, in the 19th century, this sword was discovered in a farmhouse by a sword dealer. Realizing it was Masashige's beloved sword, the dealer sought the expertise of the most prominent sword appraisal family in Japan at the time. However, this family was skeptical of its authenticity and declared it a fake. Disheartened, the sword dealer was on his way home when an official from the Edo shogunate, who had heard about the sword, pursued him and bought the sword. After the official's death, the sword was once again purchased by another sword dealer. The family that took interest in this sword was the Yamada Asayamon family, who were professional executioners and sword testers for the Edo shogunate, known for their exceptional swordsmanship. Eventually, after competing with other interested parties, they acquired the sword for 50,000 ryo, an amount equivalent to over 1 billion yen in today's currency. Ownership of the sword changed again toward the end of the 19th century. As the era became more peaceful, the Yamada family decided to part with the sword, presenting it to Emperor Meiji. The emperor, who was very fond of the sword, added a saber mount to it and wore it regularly, making it known as one of Emperor Meiji's favorite swords. After World War II, the sword was transferred to the Tokyo National Museum. In 1952, it was designated as a national treasure under the then existing law for the preservation of national treasures and remains in the museum's collection to this day. Number 3. Dojikiri Yatsutsuna. Dojikiri Yatsutsuna is the premier blade among the Tenkagoken, the 5 best swords under heaven, and is designated as a national treasure. The Tenkagoken represents the 5 most exemplary swords in the history of katana. This sword, one of the earliest in the history of Japanese swords, was crafted during the Heian period by the swordsmith Ohara Yasuna, known as the pioneer of swordsmiths. The name Dojikiri originates from a legend involving the warrior Minamoto no Yorimitsu, who is said to have slain the demon Shuten Doji, one of the most famous demons in Japanese folklore. During the Heian period, Shuten Doji and his demon followers were notorious for abducting people and committing evil acts in Kyoto. Yorimitsu received an imperial order to subdue these demons. He infiltrated the demon stronghold and hosted a banquet, serving wine laced with poison. As the intoxicated demons became immobilized, Yorimitsu used his sword to finish them off, beheading Shuten Doji with it, thereby giving the sword its name Dojikiri, meaning Shuten Doji cutter. The legend of Minamoto no Yorimitsu's demon slaying has become well known, but the story of how the sword Dojikiri Yatsuna came into his hands is also legendary. The swordsmith realized that the sword he had crafted was such a masterpiece that he decided to present it to the most powerful authority in Japan at the time, the shogun Sakanue no Muramaro. Upon receiving the sword, Muramaro, having received a divine message from the Japanese mythological deity Amaterasu, dedicated the sword to the Ise Grand Shrine. It is said that Minamoto no Yorimitsu later visited the shrine and was bestowed the sword by the deity, possibly knowing in advance that he was destined to fight demons, granting him this Japanese sword for his fated battles. Currently, this sword is housed in the Tokyo National Museum, the largest museum in Japan. There, exhibitions featuring Dojikiri Yatsuna are frequently held, allowing the public to witness this legendary sword. Number 2. Yoshimoto Samonji. Yoshimoto Samonji, also known as the Sword of Conquest, is a famous blade said to have been forged in the 14th century by Samonji, a disciple of the most renowned swordsmith Masamune. The name of this sword originates from Imagawa Yoshimoto, a warlord who initially possessed it. Yoshimoto was known as a powerful daimyo with a lineage connected to the shogunate, and was also famed as an excellent archer. However, in 1560, during the infamous Battle of Okehazama, the sword slipped from his grasp. This battle was initiated by Oda Nobunaga, who would later become one of Japan's greatest daimyos, marking a significant uplift in his reputation. In this battle, Nobunaga, with only about 2,000 soldiers, managed to defeat Imagawa's force, rumored to be 50,000 strong, through a surprise attack, killing Yoshimoto. This incredible victory significantly boosted his fame. During this battle, he secured the Yoshimoto Samonji as a trophy and made it his personal sword. The characters written in gold on the sword's hilt, reportedly by Nobunaga himself, detailed the victory of this battle. After Nobunaga's death, the sword passed into the hands of the warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and subsequently it was possessed by Tokugawa Ieyasu. Each of these figures played a crucial role in unifying Japan, which is why the sword is also known as the Sword of Conquest. Another reason the sword is so called is linked to a significant event in 1615, the Battle of Osaka Summer Campaign, one of the largest battles in Japanese history. This battle was fought by Ieyasu to eliminate the Toyotomi clan, bringing him on the verge of national unification. Ieyasu, wearing this sword into battle, emerged victorious. His victory in this battle achieved national unification, and the sword was passed down through generations thereafter. The sword, having journeyed through an era of intense turmoil alongside these rulers, is now designated as an important cultural property and is housed at the Kyoto National Museum. Number 1. Honjo Masamune. Honjo Masamune is arguably the most renowned sword globally. This blade was passed down through the Tokugawa shogunate as a symbol of succession, but tragically was confiscated by the GHQ after World War II. The origin of the Honjo Masamune name comes from an anecdote involving a warlord named Honjo Shigenaga. During the battle, Shigenaga was struck by an opponent, splitting the clasp of his helmet in two. Astonished by the sharpness of the blade, everyone who witnessed it was amazed. After defeating the enemy warlord, Shigenaga took the sword for himself and named it Honjo after his own name. Subsequently, this sword was presented to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who had achieved the unification of Japan. Hideyoshi was also known as a collector of famous swords, and many of the era's finest blades were gathered under the possession of Japan's most powerful ruler. After Hideyoshi's death, the sword was presented to the next shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu. The Tokugawa family then established the Edo shogunate in 1603, ruling as shoguns for 260 years. During this time, the sword was passed down through generations of the Tokugawa shogunate, serving as a symbol of the shogun's authority. Each new shogun was entrusted with the sword by his predecessor. Given that the sword was treasured in the shogun's house, where the finest swords from all over Japan were collected, and used as a symbol of succession, it could be argued that this sword was perhaps the most esteemed sword in Japan at that time. In 1939, World War II broke out. After Japan's defeat, the country accepted the Potsdam Declaration in 1945, which placed Japan under the occupation of the GHQ, General Headquarters of the Allied Forces. As part of their efforts to demilitarize the Japanese populace, the GHQ decided to confiscate all weapons within Japan. This included not only firearms, but also swords. The swords confiscated by the GHQ were disposed of in various ways. Some were taken as war trophies by the American occupation forces. Others were burned with gasoline, chopped up, or even melted down to be recast for uses like locomotive wheels. However, it is widely believed that the majority were dumped into the sea. Before the war, it is estimated that there were 15 million households in Japan possessing swords. Yet, approximately 3 million swords were lost due to the GHQ sword hunt. During this time, the Honjo Masamune, a symbol of the shogunate passed down through generations, was also seized. The Tokugawa family's sword collection is believed to have fallen into the hands of a sergeant from the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the United States Army. The whereabouts of these swords, including the Honjo Masamune, have since become unknown. The name of the sergeant who took the swords was recorded in katakana as Kori Baimo, which was later translated as Koldi Baimor, an unusual name. Today, sword enthusiasts around the world continue to search for its whereabouts. Should it be found and returned to Japan, there is no doubt it would be declared a national treasure. Yet, to this day, no substantial leads have been found either in Japan or internationally. The sword waits somewhere in the world to be discovered someday by someone. Japanese traditional knives are recognized as first class by professional chefs worldwide for their sharpness, akin to that of Japanese swords. This is partly due to the history of swordsmiths. For over 1,000 years, swordsmiths have been creating numerous swords for battles, playing a vital role. However, with the arrival of peaceful times in the 18th century, the demand for swords declined. Many master craftsmen then shifted from sword making to knife making, passing on their swordsmithing techniques to knife crafting. This is why Japanese knives possess such exceptional sharpness. I want everyone to experience the excellent sharpness and the beauty of the blades of Japanese knives. At HOCHO Knife, you can purchase knives online made by Japanese knife artisans. They offer a wide variety of knives, so please find and purchase your unique knife. For the product page, please check the description of this video. We hope you enjoyed this exploration into the world of Japanese swords. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting content about the history of Japanese swords. Until next time, sayonara.